believe in God? Despite that belief in God, do you find yourself struggling with anger, with depression, fear, sadness, feelings of worthlessness? If that is the case, then I think that this video series is going to be for you. Welcome to episode 3 of our Soul Snacks video series. We've been focusing on the book, The Universal Garden of Emuna by Rabbi Shalom Arush, which is a book that aims to deepen our understanding of what it means to really have faith in God. Emuna is the ancient biblical Hebrew word that means deep, unshakable faith in God. Once again, I want to give my standard caveat that if you're an atheist, I'm not judging you in any way, but this is probably not a video series that you're going to enjoy. I'd simply ask that you please not use this space, to leave comments or suggestions or arguments aimed at attempting to convince people that there is no God. There's many other platforms online for those discussions, and this is not one of them. Also, a reminder that this is not an attempt by me, by any means, certainly I'm not qualified to do it, to try to capture all of what Rabbi Arush says in this wonderful book. The Universal Garden of Emuna is a book that, if you get it, you will find that it's extremely rich. Literally these spiritual insights, leap off the page. And I'm not qualified in the least. I couldn't even come close to attempting to convey all of what Rabbi Arush has in there. This series is merely designed to present what I see as some of the biggest highlights of the book, in the hope that you'll get something out of it and also maybe get the book and read it. And that brings us to our final piece of housekeeping, which is that, again, if you live in Virginia or North Carolina and you'd like a copy of the book, we're happy to send you one, completely free. All you have to do is call us at the number on the screen or email us on the email on the screen, and we'll be, we're happy to get you that ASAP, free of charge. Okay, so before I dive back into where we left off which is chapter 3 of the book, as we record this, March 18th, 2020, we're dealing with a very scary chapter in human history, something many of us in the world I know we're hoping to avoid in our lifetimes, and that is a global pandemic of the coronavirus, otherwise known as the COVID-19 virus. And history is going to show whether or not we all reacted too little or too much to what's happening now. However, just to record one person's perspective on this date in history, listen, some places in Italy, also in Israel, are on complete lockdown and quarantine, mandatory quarantine, and there's a concern that the U.S. may be heading in that direction as well, mostly because, listen, we want to stem the tide of infection, flatten the curve, as they say, and we certainly don't know at this point really how many people are infected. Already, at this point in history, schools in Virginia have shut down for the next 2 weeks. All public events are canceled, and public gatherings of 50 people or more are banned. This is, again, all in an attempt to slow the rate of infection. Many businesses have already shut down. Listen, the fact of the matter is, though, as it turns out, this situation, as difficult as it is, presents us with a classic testing ground for the 3 principles of Emuna that we spoke about in episode 1, and that we're now turning our attention to on page 59 of the book. And in my humble opinion, page 59 of this book is probably the most important page of the entire book in terms of the understanding the framework for Emuna. So you want to probably refer back to that page repeatedly. I'm going to be referring back to it repeatedly throughout this series. I'll also let you know that this particular chapter is so rich in these very fundamental, important ideas that we're not going to be able to cover everything in chapter 3 in one video. We're going to split this into 2 videos. We may have to do that on some other chapters as well. We'll have to see as we go forward. So let's go back through the basic levels of Emuna. Level 1, basic Emuna, and that's the firm belief that everything comes from God by way of perfect divine providence, right? So you mean the coronavirus came from God, this terrible thing? Yep, 100%, 100%, without question. Number 2, this is the intermediate level of Emuna. You still have to have the first one, but then you get to the second one if you got that. And that's that everything that God does is for the very best, right? Everything that God does is for the very best. We'll talk more about this, but how can this virus be for the best? I mean, think about it in this, again, in this context we're in now. We really don't know God's perspective. I mean, he runs the entire universe. Maybe there's something more dangerous than this virus that God feels that maybe can be corrected through the effects of the virus, as difficult as they are for us. Then we've got the upper level Emuna, level 3. You still have to have the first two. But we get to level 3 is that is that everything God does is for a specific purpose. Remember, again, number 1, firm belief everything comes from God. Number 2, everything God does is for the best. Number 3, everything God does is for a specific purpose. And that's actually a little frightening when you try to discern what God's purpose is when we're talking about something that's basically affecting all of humanity. What's the message God's trying to tell us? I think there's some general things we can say that maybe apply to everyone. And when we look at what is happening to the world as a result of this virus. But first, let's dive back into the book, maybe use the current events as a backdrop again a little more to peer deeper into the principles set forth in the book. So the rest of the chapter, Rabbi Arush proceeds to go over in detail each and every level of Emuna and show it how it applies to our lives in a practical way. So let's take a look again at the basic level, which is that everything comes from God, even seemingly the most insignificant thing. Rabbi Arush tells us that we have to learn to do is train our brain to stop blaming natural phenomena as the cause for each and everything that happens to us. So rather, our first thought should always be that for some reason God has set something in motion that has caused this particular thing to happen. And that particular way of thinking has two corollaries. Number 1, the first corollary is that God is the cause of every single catalyst that happens in the world, and to you in particular. Not any particular person, situation, or natural cause is the cause. It's God. Number 2 is that any situation, tension, stress, or sorrow is none other than a test of your faith. Okay? So now, even though all this involves the first level of Emuna, many people fail and don't even get to this level. Why is that? It's because our entire lives we're all trained to set our sights to what we think is the actual cause of whatever's giving us trouble. And Rabbi Arush says that this is really a tragic mistake. When you blame somebody else or something else other than God for the problems and your suffering, no matter who it is or what it is, you really forfeit divine intervention to help you, because you're attributing this you're attributing something that happened not to God. If you don't appeal to God directly, so you're gonna fall into the hands of whatever you think is causing this problem. So he gives examples of 3 general categories of people who really fail to activate their Emuna at level 1, and they're as follows. First category he calls the helpless, right? Okay, we know people like this. These are people who they always seem to they're calling themselves victims constantly. They're victims of the police, they're victims of judges, they're victims of the tax authorities, they're victims of the government, they're victims of their employer. And since they view themselves as helpless victims, they're very prone to frustration, despair, depression, in extreme cases, suicide. Maybe you know some people like that. I mean, there are some people right now who are literally have just fallen apart because of the current situation, because they have nothing to fall back on. The second category of people who suffer but fail to activate their Emuna are people who view themselves as equal to their tormentors. So, these people tend to feel these feelings of hate boil up in them against those whom they think that have wronged them. And this can apply to maybe countries too. I mean, there are people right now who are saying, oh, it's all China's fault. Oh, it's all, that's why this thing has happened. It's because of China. It's because it was a weapon, a biological weapon. It's because of the weird food they eat over there. And then this hatred boils up. I mean, is that productive at the end of the day when we know everything comes from God? Really, it's a path that's not going to lead you to anything good. So, number 3, the third category of people that really don't activate their Emuna are people who, what he calls the lip servers. In other words, they'll say, yes, oh, of course, I believe in God. Of course, God causes everything, but except for this, right? And the bottom line is what Rabbi Arush brings home over and over again is that no matter how dismal a particular situation may seem, when we gird ourselves with complete Emuna and lean on God and try to cry out to Him from the inner depths of our soul, that's the path to getting things better, to getting to salvation. That's really when we can go beyond the limitations of nature. But if you're going to blame nature itself, then you're going to be stuck in the natural causes, the world of natural causes. Now, of course, it goes without saying, this doesn't mean in any way, shape, or form that you should not do what the scientific folks are recommending. We have an obligation to protect ourselves and to take care of our health. You should do all the reasonable things that are in accordance with the laws of nature that are being recommended by those who know what the heck they're talking about, particularly right now at this point in history. But just to keep blaming, blaming, it's not the way to go. Okay? So that's all basic level 1 Emuna. If this epidemic has shown us anything, it is that we are not in control at all. God's running the show. Right? So that's all basic level 1 Emuna. Now, a person with only this level is still deficient because he or she is still going to have questions about why God did this or that to him or to everybody else. So that brings us to a discussion of level 2 Emuna, and that God does everything for the very best. So Rabbi Arush says that this level is not separate from the first level. It's just a deeper awareness that everything that happens is from God, and therefore, since God is perfect, everything's for the best. Not almost everything, every single thing. So 99% Emuna is the same as having 0% Emuna, right? They're the same. Emuna, illuminates our hearts with the confidence that God has a very good reason for everything that he does. You want to say that God loves us and is doing everything for our very best except for the coronavirus? That's not Emuna. And our ancient wisdom tells us that when we engage in this type of mindset, or to know with certainty that everything that God does is for the very best, no matter how dire it looks at present, it's more likely that we're going to see the most trying situations in life make a complete turnaround for the better. On the other hand, Rabbi Arush provides an example on page 75 that even someone who considers themselves religious will likely invoke severe judgments against themselves in accordance with the divine will if they don't realize that everything is in accordance with the divine will. In other words, a person who's religious yet constantly complains about their situation is actually not religious at all, compared to somebody who maybe doesn't do all the religious things, doesn't go to church, doesn't go to synagogue, doesn't go to mosque, but they understand and they live with this basic second principle of Emuna, that everything God does is for the very best. And really this brings us to the point that Rabbi Arush is really trying to bring home here in this chapter, and that is that developing Emuna, the deep faith in God, really is the entire point of our existence on this earth. I'll say it again. Developing Emuna really is the entire point of our existence on earth. If our current situation has taught us anything, it's that life is constantly throwing curveballs at us. At this point in history, we're now experiencing the ultimate curveball. We're all facing potentially grueling physical, emotional, interpersonal, financial challenge, which has caught us completely off guard. So, many people right now feel completely disoriented. Some people have already come to the conclusion that their lives are going to be ruined because of this virus. And of course, some people are going to die. It's just a fact. With Emuna, though, we know we're never confused. We're never disoriented. We know that God doesn't ruin anything. We realize that God's doing everything for our benefit in order to enable us to get close to him and successfully complete our designated tasks on this earth, even if it's hard to see right now. So what then's the message that this virus brings us? Really, for more details on that, I think we can get with that next time for some possible speculation on that issue. But what's clear, I think, in my humble opinion, is that we've all been given a wake-up call to show us that we don't control everything. God's running the show. And I think that's probably enough till next time. So we'll pick up on page 79, about halfway through chapter 3. And next time we're going to be talking about something that really naturally goes along with Emuna. It's also very important, which is, it almost seems impossible in our current circumstance, which is happiness. And the notion that happiness is actually a choice that you can make. That's not how most of us think of happiness at all, but that's for next time. Once again, a reminder that if you reside in Virginia or North Carolina, and you'd like a free copy of this book, Universal Garden of Emuna, all you got to do is call the number on the screen or email us at the email on the screen, and we'll be happy to get you out a free copy ASAP. Also, if you found this video series to be helpful, please don't forget to subscribe and like it. Until next time, this is Joe Miller, wishing you all blessings for everything good and stay safe. Joe Miller out.